So with Jordan Peterson, I think that there is I think there is genuine empathy that he has, but that he is also performatively empathetic, right? And I can say that is
interesting. Okay.
Certainly the case because, well, one, he cries a lot, right? For an awful lot, and often at the drop of a hat. He's kind of pulled it back more recently, but he
gets angrier now. He doesn't cry as much. He rages.
Less crime, but he can be set off. It just depends what people say. But the reason I want to mention is I listened to his audiobook. I think it was 12 Rules for Life, or the second one, right? And it's him reading it, as you would expect. And there's a chapter where he's talking about things, and he starts crying like during the reading of the chapter. Now, he recorded it, right? And he selected to not do that again. Like, he decided he wants to keep in the crying because, and I would say it from his, like, if you take it in the Steelman view, he wants to show, the genuine reaction that he had to that. But I think also that is like quite a manipulative thing to do, because it's like he is leveraging the emotional effect to generate a response in his audience. And I feel like a lot of his, when he's leveraging that, is basically saying, I care so deeply about the young lost men in my audience. Like, they don't have role models, and they're suffering, and they're like, and the effect of that is that it essentially emotionally confirms to them that he is, the missing father figure. Like, he genuinely, compassionately cares for them in a way that other people don't. And yeah,
sure.
Like, so in that respect, it's not just that he does. It's like also, creating very strong in-group and out-group boundaries and all that.
Sure,
kind of thing.
but the crying thing in particular, can I?
Yeah.
Can I push
back?
Yeah,
go ahead.
Because I think you and I have the exact opposite perception of this. Because in my mind, it's okay. He's a clinical psychologist, number one, so he spends his whole life talking to people, intimately understanding all of their worst problems, dealing with people who. Okay, hold that
He's
thought.
Not a clinical psychologist, but carry on.
Well, he was for.
He was. Yeah, he was.
Oh, okay. All right.
When's the last time he had a patient?
All right, hold on. Sorry, I gotta pay my fine to the language police here. No, that's fine. Fair enough. My point is, though, he was a clinical psychologist for, I don't know, 20, 25 years, something like that.
Decades.
So yeah. So he had intimate interaction with the most emotionally charged, horrific parts of people's lives. Then he goes and does his lectures. He talks about how he gets letters from people about how, his lectures save their lives. He, in a very real way, and I don't disbelieve this at all, has saved people's lives through the advice that he's given, through his perspectives, through, in the same way that a clinical therapist can save someone's life. So in my mind, it's like, to me, it's so obvious that he's like crushed by the weight of all that. I would say part of his problem is he's let that get to his head, where he's like, look at all this evidence of all the people I've helped, which is indisputably true. Therefore, I'm justified in calling Debbie Wasserman Schultz a bitch or whatever he did. It's like the dumbest shit in the world. So, but I definitely don't think that's performative or I get the point about like, it's manipulative to do the audiobook recording and then put it in. I could see that, but if that is his genuine reaction, and he was writing the book after the period of time which I just described, when he was overwhelmed with all the letters of, support and, people saying how much he's helped them. I don't see that as performative at all. And I get, certainly people can do that, can use emotion. And this is the fundamental thing. I trust people who are emotional far more than people who are not. Because when Jordan Peterson cries at the drop of a hat, especially after watching him for so long, I can tell the things that kind of set him off. And I'm like, okay, this fits the pattern. This isn't just some like genuine psychopath who's like literally faking the tears, like a robot. I trust someone like that far more than someone like Tucker Carlson or Gavin Newsom, who quite clearly can just lie through their teeth and never shed a tear, and they're clearly playing a character. I don't think Jordan Peterson might be playing a character, but it's the same one he is when he's in his daily life. And that's why I trust it more. And I don't think it's cultish. But what do you think about that?
So the reason I made the distinction with like the clinical psychologist thing is purely to say that Jordan often like kind of references that. But like if you understand like what Jordan's role is, he's a political pundit now, right? He hasn't been a clinician.
He's a Daily Wire shill, I would say, specifically, but
right, correct. But so like I feel that he himself encourages that kind of conflation, right? And it will be coming up in a decade, right, before he's been doing anything related to like psychology. So anyway, it's just a point that I think is worth noting, because all the stuff around the Ontario College and all that. Anyway, your point about the emotion being genuine. So I don't think that it is the case that like Jordan doesn't feel anything and just like turns on tears. That's not my argument. My argument is that like in the same way with the book, like you say, Jordan is having a reaction, right, when he's reading. I don't think he got an onion and like rubbed it into his face, right? But he knows, like everybody would know, okay, I recorded that and I wept, right? Like, so that is and if you then choose to include it, you are doing that with an intention, right? Like that you want to invoke a kind of response, because you could just calm down, relax, and record it again, right? And in most cases, most audiobooks don't involve people crying. So there is a deliberate intention in doing that. And I think the deliberate intention is to demonstrate like his emotional investment in what he's talking about.
That's not dishonest though, right?
Yeah, but so I don't think a whole bunch of like cult leaders are being dishonest when they display emotion. Like they are often genuinely believing in whatever it is that they're promoting, or and a whole bunch of political commentators as well. But that doesn't mean that you cannot use your emotion to kind of like impact the audience into like a particular direction that you want them to go, right? So I think it's emotionally manipulative is the way I would put it.
Can I just real quick on that? Peterson's whole thing is say what you believe to be true and see what happens, right? That's like his central thing that he's internalized. Something that I've internalized as a Maps of Meaning fan, not a Jordan Peterson fan, again. And it's funny because you say that, because I make videos, and sometimes I will be faced with it. I'll do a take, I'll kind of make some mistake, or I'll say something kind of goofy, and then I choose to leave that in because I'm like, I kind of want to show people what my authentic response was in that moment, rather than just curate the thing. Now, I get what you're saying. Audiobooks don't do that. It's a stylistic thing. I don't know. I guess I see your point. I just don't think it's that. There might be more convincing stuff that you can put out. I just don't think that's particularly compelling. Because like you said, other cult leaders cry and believe in their stuff, which is why I would never use that as evidence why they're wrong. I would, but
that's not evidence of why they're wrong. It's evidence of like cultish dynamics. And that's the criteria that we're using. We're not saying that makes someone wrong. We're just saying that's dynamics that you see in like the kind of cult settings. But the other thing I would say is like any clinician, almost every clinician, there's some exceptions with approaches, but they're actually taught. So when you're dealing with clients and whatnot, you are not crying and like breaking down in tears. In fact, that's not helpful for the client, right? You're supposed to like develop a detachment so that you can better deal with their problems. Now, you're invested in them, but you're not supposed, if you had to emotionally take on everything that happened to your client, it would make you non-effective. And Jordan Peterson, again, was a clinical psychologist for decades. So he would know that that is not.
I get that makes sense. I didn't even know that you weren't supposed to. I wouldn't say I made. My therapist cried in our session one time. This was like 5 years ago, and that sticks in my head. So maybe that he shouldn't have done that.
Whatever you did to him That's
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
but it
whatever I
depends.
did.
There are some therapies where there's like a lot of interactive. Like I'm not saying the therapist would never become emotionally invested, but like I
Yeah,
would say in
fair enough.
almost
No, no,
all
no. That's
CBT or that kind of thing,
yeah. That makes
detachment is
sense. That makes sense. That makes sense. Okay, and I don't want to get hung up on this. That's fair. I feel like I laid out a bunch of stuff I want to give you. So just to the broader point about him getting weighed down by the hundreds of thousands of letters he gets saying that he's saved people's lives. To me,
yeah. Like
that's very authentic in my opinion, and
I'm
non-guru-y.
yeah, well, okay, but hold on, because like, I mean, this is something I think is worth considering. Like, imagine Tony Robbins or any like self-help guru. They will get tons of feedback and letters. Deepak Chopra as well, like saying, "You changed my life. What you've taught, it's really helped me. I had cancer, and I've managed to reframe that experience." And I think the people expressing that are genuine. The feeling of the people that have like taught something that people have got benefit from would be like hopefully genuine, right? That they are happy that they've had that effect. But that is a kind of independent thing from what you are teaching, or if you are engaging in like manipulative practices, or if you are creating like a strongly insular community or this kind of thing. So I think
That's
that you
fair.
can be
Yeah,
genuine
because
and
I've
have that
seen
reaction without that.
because I've never even watched an interview with Deepak Chopra. I've seen some of Tony Robbins, and I've seen him like tear up, and he does these very weird shit. And I think Tony Robbins is very much cultic in, he goes into his events and he's like, "All right, everyone, scream as loud as you can," and he like all of the classic like cult dynamic stuff. Jordan Peterson, to my knowledge, has not done that. But I think I'm more clearly understanding your perspective because you're sort of seeing Tony Robbins and his effect on people in a similar way to Jordan Peterson and his effect on people, because I definitely believe that people have been helped by listening to Tony Robbins. And so I can't discount that.
And
I would say,
Oprah.
and Oprah, sure. I guess I would say two things. Number one, just to be clear, I definitely have a bias then in this case because I'm one of those disgusting straight white males who had mental health issues and who benefited from listening to Jordan Peterson's lectures about actually life does have meaning. You can sit there and rationalize all you want, but here's all the neuropsychology underneath depression and stuff like that. Stuff that I think I'd be very hard pressed to compare that to whatever the more extreme like placebo type stuff Tony Robbins is dealing out. So I'll admit my bias there. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say I think Frankel said it better though. That's
That's fair. That's a very good point. And I would say another reason I'm pro the Peterson self-help perspective is because at minimum he introduces deeper thinkers that are not him, and that's helped me a lot. Viktor Frankl has been a big one. Ian McGilchrist.
Yeah,
I'm betting you're going to have an episode on Ian McGilchrist at some point soon, right?
We will.
Okay.
Yeah, I can't say I'm a huge fan of his, but I would say that
I
like
suspect it.
yeah, don't you feel? I mean, like I'm not arguing this, Paul, as in like because I think you already would acknowledge this, but like that value from Jordan seems to have lessened a lot more. Like a lot of his content now is like, yes, he does have on occasional philosophers or academics or Ian McGilchrist types, but he also has a lot more like climate contrarians and Russell Brand and whoever like has come up in the culture war the past
he has straight up like Republican congressmen as well. So,
yeah.
Although to be fair, he did have Dean Phillips, who's a Democrat congressman. To your point, I would agree with you. I debated Vosh on whether or not Jordan Peterson was a net positive. If that were offered today, I would not take that debate because even though I do believe he's a net positive, I don't think I can make the case because you could just point to my biggest thing, which again we can talk about later or at all or whatever, is I think he just sits there and is a straight up shill for the Daily Wire, and he does not address at all the difficult questions related to Israel-Palestine, any of that. He he, in my opinion, levies very strong critiques against religious fundamentalism, but I've never heard him once even allude to the religious fundamentalists on the Israeli side, which has to be recognized in that conflict to get the whole picture. Again, we can talk about that later. So there's yeah, Sam, exactly. But so I'm sympathetic, and that's why I'm not like I'm more curious to hear your thoughts as opposed to debate it, because I do not I am sympathetic to anyone who says Jordan Peterson is a net negative, because clearly he puts out all kinds of stuff. Do you have any final thoughts on that before we move on?
No, that seems I'm not going to challenge that he's currently a net negative, but I don't at all argue that like it would be insane and impossible for people to have derived any benefit from like Jordan Peterson's content, like a whole bunch of people have. So my argument isn't like to say you can't have done that or you shouldn't have done that. Like yeah, that's not something that I would ever.
No. That's fair. And I don't think you're doing that. And to be honest, a good chunk of what I'm trying to do is to that's why I said I'm a Maps of Meaning fan, not a Jordan Peterson fan, because I think there's a lot of good stuff in Maps of Meaning that is valid. And that's in fact the lens that I use to critique Peterson. He talks about, for example, he talks about his Egyptian myths, right? Osiris was the Egyptian god. He became old and stale. And it's like, hey, Osiris, maybe you should cut it out on Twitter then. Jesus Christ. Like, I think you can perform a very strong internal critique of Jordan Peterson using his framework. And I believe that's
absolutely
what I'm trying to do.
Like,
in many respects.
Like isn't one of his rules, like, speak carefully.
Be precise in your speech.
Yeah. And also like set your house in order before you go out to like transform the world, right? So there's a whole bunch of things like Michaela, so but in any case, yeah, like, so we I can't remember what we rated Jordan on the cultish dynamics, but it wasn't actually primarily on the emotional displays. It's more the general thing with that feature on the Gurometer is that it is mostly about the constant disparagement, of the out group as like evil, immoral, bad, like, and nefarious, and the in group as enlightened, good, and wholesome. And the one example I was thinking of is, like there was the relatively creepy videos that were going around with the current protests in America, right, over the Palestine issue. Creepy in the sense that where there was chanting, right, where there was a whole group of students and they were being led in a chant where I think there was like Jewish protesters and they were kind of responding to them, and there was somebody leading a chant where they would say something and everybody would respond, right, and it didn't look good, right? It wasn't a good optic thing to be doing if you're not wanting to present yourself as like having cultish elements. But in that respect, in the same way, I wouldn't say that in all circumstances where somebody is like being led by someone and reciting something, that it fundamentally means it's a creepy cult, right? Like there are plenty of occasions where there could be chants or whatever, and it could be like a legitimate presentation of emotion. But if you see that, I think that most people would say, okay, that's got like cultish energy. And that's the general thing with that, like, that feature is it isn't like it's up there at the top that people are going to go to a compound and dress in the same clothes, but it's just when you see those dynamics, you kind of get
that's fair.